Um, I actually got this idea from a group called Expressive Painting, and I will post a link for that group in case you're interested in joining. And this was posted on that group, and it was a technique that I thought would really work wonderfully with Kandinsky. Now, of course, Kandinsky did not have markers. You know, he did not have markers. So if he did have markers, I'm sure he would have used them. But at the time, of course, he didn't have them. But I want to tell you about markers. Now, markers are cool because, you know, I work with kids for one thing, and sometimes, you know, the kids leave the caps off and they dry out. Well, one day I was going through my millions of markers, as you can see. I've been collecting them. And I just really thought, well, maybe I can use this as a brush. You know, maybe I can just use this as a, you know, some kind of a brush. And so I took the marker and I actually dunked it in the water, and, well, sure enough, it actually was revived. You know, it actually came alive again, and it became like watercolor. Now, it's no longer the marker. You know, you can't really draw with it, but you can use it for watercolor. So keep that in mind when you when you think that your markers are no longer usable. You know, that's a great technique for continuing to use your markers as a way of covering a surface. Okay, so I'm going to tell you that the way I did this is I randomly put colors on the paper, and this is just regular, you know, not even really expensive paper. You can work with like expensive paper and get probably even a better effect, but just for experimenting and exploring your creativity, don't worry about expensive paper, because that really, I think, really it causes you to feel like intimidated and afraid to put the first line on the paper because it's so expensive, and it's probably not a good idea to do that. Anyway, so I want to tell you also that not everybody colors their hair, but if you do color your hair, don't throw those little bottles away, because you can put paint in these bottles and with a little bit of water and shake it, and it makes the most amazing liquid acrylics that actually will create line. So you can see there's line here, and I'll explain to you how I got the shapes that are on the line as we go. Okay, so I first of all started, as I do when I do the Kandinsky paintings, I started with just randomly taking different marker colors and just drawing lines, and when the lines were drawn, of course, they created shapes. The next thing I did is I took and colored into the shapes, and I did that, and I didn't really think about my color scheme or anything, but I notice now that I used a lot of blue and orange, which are complementary, but I wasn't thinking about that when I did it. Anyway, you can see that there's a layer effect, and the thing is, there's different kinds of things that creates a layer. The splatter technique, I actually use the marker just like I use the brush. I just wet the marker, I dunked it in the water, and I just, just splattered it on the paper. It was very cool. It made this really interesting dots and rain making. It was just kind of looked like rain, actually. It's very in fact, it's even a better technique than using the brush. It creates a different effect anyway. I like the way it built up. There's lots of depth in this painting because you can see many layers behind it, and I created it with the wet markers, which is watercolor. And markers are relatively saturated, and they're bright. But of course, you know, some markers were not as bright, but I didn't even worry about that at that point. I just basically just kept going with the process and playing around with the technique. Now, if you've looked at anything on anything about Kandinsky, you'll notice that he used black lines a lot, and he used something that almost looked like it was like a wire, that was just one strand of wire from the edge of the painting all the way. And of course now you can see I have another spiral, and I use spirals a lot. So you know, this again, I was not thinking about this. It just came when I was working. So, you know, I think it's important that you work as fast as you can, and with markers, because you really don't need to dry them a lot. You can actually work on wet paper and wet paint. It's not like acrylics. You can layer as you go and build up layers as you go, without having to take and dry it and interfere with your creative process. So work as fast as possible and try and, you know, bypass your censor, and just keep going and keep going and keep going. And then the last thing I did was, while the black paint was dry, I dried the black line. And when I dried the black line, it formed shapes, just because the dryer moved the paint around, and I thought that was very, very cool. So that's a really neat technique that you can try also. And so anyway, this is the technique that I wanted to share with you, and I will share more as I go. But I thought this was a great idea, and like I said, I know Kandinsky would have used it, and I know Paul Klee, who's the next artist we're going to be talking about, would definitely use it, because he was very, very much an artist that explored media, and I'll be sharing a little bit of that too. You know, he was the first one that actually just really mixed a lot of different media together by exploring. So I will list some of the things that he did. But anyway, try this and see how you like it. And now the next video I'm going to do, I will actually show you step-by-step process, and I won't be talking, okay? So I hope to see yours very soon, and post your work to share, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay, this is the, some things missing in this painting. So what I'm going to do is I actually am going to do another layer. So after you do your black line part of the painting, you might want to look at it and see if there's too much dark in the painting. If you like it that way, leave it, but if you feel that you need a little bit more color in it, then the next thing you need to do is use the watered down acrylic paint that we did in the last painting. Actually in the first painting that we did, the one that we did before we started working with markers. Okay, so I'm going to show you this, and I'll turn it off, and then I'm going to kind of demonstrate what I'm doing with the more saturated paint, a little thicker paint. Now, when we did the first painting, we used like watered down acrylic paint, and so that's what I'm going to use now. And I want to tell you about the watered down acrylic paint that you use. You can save it if you cover it with something that seals the air out. You can actually save your paint for some time. And if it gets too, dry and thick, if it's not too dry, it's still actually usable. You can add just a teeny bit of more water to it to make it just a little more liquid. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take it over to this table here and demonstrate that now. So, what I'm doing now is I'm taking my brush and I'm not slinging it really a long ways from the paper because you don't want to get the paint on the floor, but you just put dots of paint on it, and that's again going to create some movement and bring some more light to the picture. I like this part of the layering, and it's finer, kind of like a finer dot than the marker. So just randomly sling your paint. And then, if you want to change the color, you can wash out your brush, and you don't necessarily dry it, but just make sure it doesn't have any paint in it, any other paint in it. And then I'm going to use a little bit of yellow, because again that's going to bring some light to the painting. There we go. And then I kind of think it's done, so I'm going to wait. I think I'm just going to wait. I don't want it to actually bleed. I want it to be left this way. So I'm not going to dry it. I'm just going to leave it this way and let it dry by itself. Okay? So I'll be back and to talk to you a little bit about this process and the importance of spontaneity and the importance of bypassing your censor and the importance of being open and receptive to the creative process, and also the importance of having your material ready to work through the process and without having to stop and look for something. Okay? So this is the painting.